Hello, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dr. Soul Brother here, trying to give everybody a remedy for the ills, the psychological ills that we suffer from collectively as a people. Hope everybody's doing fine, and I want to dive right into this, not take up a whole lot of time, but at the same time give folks food for thought. My topic is leave the divine nine alone. Let me repeat that. Leave the divine nine alone. For those who are unfamiliar with the term divine nine, if you are familiar with Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, you've seen reference made to her and the divine nine, or she herself has made reference to the divine nine. And that is the divine nine consists of Black Greek letter organizations that exist. And she herself is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Um, I need to break down the importance of our Black Greek letter organization. I have to stress Black Greek letter because you have white Greek letter. Well, we're not talking about them. We're talking about the Black Greek letter organizations. Those organizations came into existence post slavery, post Reconstruction, at the early part of the 1900s. As a matter of fact, let's go back and break this down. You had what was during slavery, you had what was called the Prince Hall Masons, you had the Eastern Stars. Um, and that existed during slavery. Then post slavery, you had the Boule, which is separate from the Divine Nine, but there's a connection to some extent. Boule founded in 1904. You have a lot of professionals who are part of that. Now, unlike the Greek letter organizations or the Prince Hall Masons or the Eastern Stars, Boule, you have to be invited in, from what I understand. Um, but the Greek letter organizations, you go in and um, inquire about joining, all the rest of that. So, the first Black Greek letter organization was founded December 4th, 1906, on the campus of Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. That's upstate New York. The second Greek letter organization was founded in 1911, I believe. Um, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated at Indiana University in um, in Bloomington, um, Indiana. Then you had the Omega Psi Phi fraternity that was founded in on the campus of Howard University in 1911. And then you had Phi Beta Sigma founded at Howard University in 1914. Now, those are the fraternities. And then also you had the um, uh, there's another fraternity, Iota Phi Theta, which was founded in Maryland in 1963. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated was founded January 15th, 1908. Delta Sigma Theta founded January. Um, that was that one there was founded in at Howard University as well. That's important to know and understand that the first two Black Greek letter organizations, sororities for the women, were founded there. That was founded January 1913. Okay. Then after the you had the Zetas, Zeta Phi Beta, founded January 1920, Howard University. Then lastly, Sigma Gamma Rho, founded November 1922 at Butler University. Okay, Butler. Now, Butler is not an HBCU. Um, Indiana U is not an HBCU. So the majority of our Greek letter organizations were founded at HBCU, Howard specifically. Now, let me move forward. They came into existence because the white folks would not allow blacks into their organizations. And then the other thing is that black people had a need to want to connect with each other. And within that, you had a cultural thing. Um, they played a role, a significant role historically in our community and in our culture. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about the fact that the Greek letters that that you see the members rocking, so to speak, do not represent any contradiction. What do I mean by that? If anybody's old enough to remember, back in the 80s and the 90s, there was this notion that black folk who joined black Greek letter organizations were fools. And also, if you called yourself a Greek, you were a fool. Let's be clear. And this is coming from somebody who actually pledged a fraternity during my undergraduate years at an HBCU. The only thing that is Greek are the letters. The history that you learn has nothing to do with Greece, okay? And there's no homage to the Greeks. There's not even reference made to the so-called Greek philosophers. There are a lot of references made to those black folk in the fraternities and sororities, the founders, as well as those who pledged and were initiated. So Greek letters, that's the extent of it. So it's not a contradiction. It really isn't. Um, we also need to make something clear. There are Africanisms that exist in our Black Greek letter organizations. For example, if anybody has seen step shows or just folks stepping on the yard, and even the whole pledging process, although it's a little different now because the Panhellenic Council made some changes as far as the pledging goes. But if you go to the old school pledging process, that whole process has Africanism. If you watch the miniseries Roots, the very first episode where you see Kunta Kinte um, going through manhood training, that manhood training in many ways, I'm sorry, what you see going on with the fraternity and sororities is similar to the manhood training that took place, what you saw in Roots, the first episode with a young Kunta Kinte. That was manhood training. Well, it's so what we find, we need to be clear. Black frats are not identical to the white frats, nor are the um, black sororities identical to the white sororities. We need to be clear on that. Okay, so the whole process is different. And all the thing about the bonding and all of that, you have to keep in mind. Um, when you're online pledging, you're referred to as line brothers or line sisters. Okay. They don't do that in white fraternities and sororities because it's a cultural thing. See, and that brings up this whole point. Even though we all may be Americans in this American society, there are cultural distinctions and cultural differences. Okay. So when a white person sees a black fraternity or sorority on the yard, on the campus, um, going through certain things outwardly, they have trouble relating because that's not identical. Again, it's cultural. Um, I want to talk about some people who are members of or have either were members and are members of our fraternities and sororities. For example, W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, Alpha Man. Carter G. Woodson, who's considered the father of black history in this country, Omega Psi Phi. Ernest Just, Omega Psi Phi. I think his background was in botany or zoology, something like that. Omega Psi Phi. Um, Huey P. Newton, co-founder of the Black Panther Party, Phi Beta Sigma, as well as a Prince Hall Mason. As a matter of fact, truth be told, not all, but a lot of your uh, members of the Divine Nine are members of the Prince Hall, Scottish Rite, and Eastern Star. Okay? Let's be clear on that. Vice President Kamala Harris, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, pledged in the spring of 1986 at Howard University. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Alpha Man, is an Alpha, a member of A Phi A, Alpha Phi Alpha. His best friend, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, Kappa Alpha Psi. Michael Jordan, basketball player, Omega Psi Phi. Dr. Betty Shabazz, the widow of Malcolm X, Delta Sigma Theta. Mrs. Myrlie Evers, the widow of Medgar Evers, Delta Sigma Theta. Bill Cosby, comedian, Omega Psi Phi. Okay? Pan Africanist Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana attended Lincoln University back in the day. He pledged Phi Beta Sigma. Same thing with Nnamdi Azikiwe, who became a leader in Nigeria. He also pledged Phi Beta Sigma. Norman Washington Manley, the father of Michael Manley, both of them served as prime ministers in their country of Jamaica. Norman Washington Manley pledged Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. The historian, underrated and underappreciated, I dare say, Charles H. Wesley, Alpha Phi, proud Alpha Phi Alpha member. Not only was he a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, he was a proud member of Prince Hall Mason, and he was also a member of the Boule. His daughter, Charlotte Wesley Holman, Delta Sigma Theta. We could go on. The list is long. So these people, these naysayers, and I'm being polite when I say that, who want to take a dig at and try to tear down our institutions that served as a bridge over troubled waters and got us from point A to point B. And I challenge dare anybody to show me where black fraternities and sororities have been a hindrance in our community. Now I will say this and acknowledge that there were some things that went on that created problems, like out of control hazing. But those things represent what? That type of thing represents self-inflicted wounds. But I know you who go in on the fraternity sororities, your motivation has very little, if any, to do with out of control hazing. In fact, truth be told, you use out of control hazing as a pretext to go in on the fraternity sororities. Your main thing has been what? The fact that you're walking around with these Greek letters. Okay? That's been your angst. That's been a problem in your mind. And you want to turn around and impose your personal hangups on other people, which is very selfish, very selfish. And here we are at this stage in the game in 2023. We're saying we're not having it anymore. No more of this. We're putting you on notice to back up off of that. And I'm going to go into something that I was going to go into later, but I'm going to go into it right now while it's fresh on my mind. If you want to be critical of organizations, the Greek letter organizations, the Divine Nine, if you will, um, it's your prerogative if you don't want to become a member. It's not for everybody. That's understood, and we respect that. However, what you're not going to do is impose your biases, hangups, and all the rest of it on other people. Keep that stuff to yourself. Keep it to yourself. Why do I say it so strongly? Because I recognize what damage this has done. You can hardly find on college campuses, white college campuses, that is, where our fraternity and sororities have the same presence that they once had 30, 40 years ago. And much of it has to do with your reckless mouths. And this is the cold part. Some of you, and you know who you are, some of you have gone in on these organizations when you yourself Know of people within your family, including your parents. I know of a guy right now who would go in on fraternities and sororities as far back as I can remember, only to discover recently that his mother was in a sorority. Make that make sense. Make that make sense. But anyway, um, I also want to talk about the movie School Days in this context. In many ways, one could argue that Spike Lee's School Days played a role in people throwing shade on our black fraternities and sororities in many ways. But the thing is this again, if you don't want to be a part of this, that's your prerogative. But don't go in on things that you know very little or nothing about. We recently, in recent times, witnessed our dear brother, and may he rest in peace, Mr. Harry Belafonte, aka Mr. B, became an honorary member of Phi Beta Sigma. I salute the Sigmas for this, because if anybody was deserving of that honor, it was Mr. Harry Belafonte. Why do I say that? Because of the role he played in the movement. And let's be clear, many of the people, including Dr. Martin Luther King, who he stood shoulder to shoulder with uh, during that hellish time in the civil rights movement, many of them were proud members of the Black Greek letter fraternities and sororities back then. So um, he played his role and he put in work. So it was quite it's honorable it's that they would choose to select him as an honorary brother of Phi Beta Sigma. So for them, I want to publicly salute the Sigmas. Let me move on. Vice President Kamala Harris, I referenced earlier. Let's be clear, whether you like her or loathe her, whether you agree, disagree with her politics, no matter what side of the fence you're on, whether you are Democrat, Republican, or independent. And this is not a political program, but I'm raising this to make a point. Um, People are talking about the Divine Nine more than they were before because of Vice President Kamala Harris. First of all, she attended an HBCU, which is where she pledged and was initiated into Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated, or I should say Alpha Kappa Alpha in Sorority Incorporated. My mistake. And she's clearly a proud member. And why was she a member? She was influenced by a woman named Christine Simmons in the Bay Area, I believe Oakland, who was a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha in Sorority Incorporated, and she herself pledged at Howard University in the early 1950s. And she was, as you say in the black community, a play auntie. So to Vice President Kamala Harris, she was known affectionately as Aunt Chris. So we have Aunt Chris, aka Christine Simmons, to thank for this. Okay? So let's be clear. And in many ways, we have Kamala Harris's mother for playing a role in helping to shape and model the Kamala Harris we see today. That's a topic for another day, and that's coming up sooner than you think. Let me move on. I want to talk about some of these people who were known for going in on the black fraternity and sororities. But before I deal with them, I want to address some of the people. No, I'm going to address them first. You know the name Ashra Kwesi, the Egyptologist slash Afrocentric. Far back as I can remember, he would go in on, as he would call, the freaky Greeks and try to draw parallels between the freaky Greeks, as he called them, in Greece and our black fraternities and sororities. And this was taking place when around the time that the movie School Days was out, and most of us saw that movie. And that's one of the things that helped to contribute in some instances, discouraging people from going down that route in terms of pledging a Greek letter organization, a black Greek letter organization. Then you had Mr. Steve Coakley, who was a conspiratorialist who would put in some good work to some extent, but in many ways, he helped to further do damage. What do I mean by that? What Ashra Kwesi did not do, Coakley took things to another level. First of all, attacking our institutions, attack like our HBCUs, as well as our Black Greek letter organizations. And then, of course, anybody, and I want y'all to hear me well on this, anybody who talks about the Boule, talking about the Boule crowd and all that kind of stuff. I know the African Diaspora Channel is notorious for this. I want to talk to you because y'all have gone too far now. And let me be clear, Mr. Philip Scott, whenever you hear this show, I want you to hear me and listen carefully. You've gone too far, bruh. You've gone too far with your attack on the Boule. In the beginning, when you were talking about the Boule, you were talking about it using them as a euphemism. But I saw your show in recent times, recently, I believe a week or so ago, and you post a photograph of the founders of the Boule, and you suggest that they are somehow in a conspiracy with white people, white folks um, to undermine the black community. When in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Where are the receipts? You have none. All you're doing is whistling Dixie, frankly. And I'm being polite when I say that. So, Mr. Phil Scott and others of that ilk, when you go in on our organizations, you better have receipts. Otherwise, you look insane and you're helping to engage in disinformation. And we're saying, stop it right now. Because if you keep it up, we're going to have a problem. And that's not a threat. I'm telling you, that's a problem. We're going to have a problem. Do you really want to have that conversation? I don't think you do. I really don't. Now, I want to address this very quickly before my time runs out. I want to mention names that some of y'all, depending on your age, would be or should be familiar with. Khalid Muhammad, Asa Hilliard, Francis Cress Welsing, and Tony Browder. They all have something in common. Believe it or not, all of those I just mentioned are deceased except Tony Browder, but that's not the commonality. The commonality is this: all pledged and were initiated into the Divine Nine. Khalid Muhammad, as a young undergrad at Dillard University in New Orleans, pledged Omega Psi Phi, and his line was known as the Funky 15. Asa Hilliard pledged Omega Psi Phi. Francis Cress Welsing, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, was a member of Zeta Phi Beta. And Tony Browder is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Now, I'm going to mention somebody else here who you may or may not know was a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi, and that was the attorney, may he rest in peace, Chokwe Lumumba. That's right, Chokwe Lumumba was a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, and by extension, his son is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. And let's be clear, Chokwe Lumumba, attorney Chokwe Lumumba, became a member of Kappa Alpha Psi while he sported the name Chokwe Lumumba. In other words, he didn't become a member of Kappa Alpha Psi before he changed his name. He was initiated into that organization, into that fraternity, as Chokwe Lumumba. Are you going to say he was a brainwashed Negro? You've got to be out your wig hat. If that's what you think, and that's what you want to impose on other people. And while I'm at it, let's be clear. Steve Coakley had his own personal hangups. Personal hangups. Truth of the matter is, he, in his younger years, was trying to become a member of the Divine Nine. Y'all didn't know that, but that's real. We got the receipts. So then you ask, well, why would he go in on those organizations? It's called sour grapes. That's what we're dealing with. So I would listen, watch the movie School Days very carefully. Look at the character Dap Dunlap, Mr. as his girlfriend called him, all the way down pro-black nationalist. Look at it carefully. He was online pledging, but he dropped for whatever reason. And so he too represented sour grapes. He had it in for the Greeks, including his girlfriend. If you remember when you watched the movie, He went off because his girlfriend expressed an interest in pledging Delta the following semester. He'd like to have a fit. That was his problem. But yet, uh, he wanted his cousin to pledge. Make that make sense. No, it makes sense only if you understand this. In a strange way, he was kind of living through his vicariously through his cousin's experience, in a sense. But that's where analysis comes in when it comes to that movie. But here's the thing. Um, these people, the Afrocentrics, who go in not just on the black fraternity and sororities, they're going on the black church, our HBCUs, etc. And what do they bring to the table? Nothing. Nothing. What has the AAPRP brought to the table? What institutions have they built? What has Patrice Lumumba Coalition built? Do they even exist? No, they don't. They are defunct. But guess what? Oh, not only that, there was a so-called African fraternity at Morehouse College in the late 80s. Guess what? That's defunct. That was a way to try to reinvent the wheel, which wasn't necessary. Called itself Kemet New. Well, guess what? Where Kemet New at now? Nowhere to be found because they're defunct. Okay? Eddie Claude would know about that. Ain't that right, bruh? Because from what we understand, you pledged that as an undergrad. It'd be very interesting to hear what he has to say about Kemet New, why he went that route, and what happened to them. Why are they still standing? But guess what? All of the Divine Nines that exist have been existing since the early 1900s, and they're still here. As a matter of fact, I want to publicly salute the young ladies, the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Why? Because they recently established a credit union. That's an institution. Patrice Lumumba Coalition hasn't done that. All African People's Revolutionary Party hasn't done that. No, what these organizations, what they've done, they've tried to disabuse us of our American identity, which is a crime, a straight up crime. That's what they've done. And they've done damage. And so the reality is this: if you bet on that horse, you will go nowhere. Period. Period. Now, I'm going to say this in closing. At the same time that I'm defending the Divine Nine, I have to chastise and get on the Divine Nine for this. You should have spoken up when all of this backlash was taking place 30, 35 years ago. And to Khalid Muhammad, Asa Hilliard, Francis Cress Welsing, what is unfortunate and frankly a crime is that they did not speak up either when this backlash was taking place between 30 and 35 years ago. They kept their mouths closed. The only person, Khalid Muhammad, would make reference to him being a member. Well, let me put it this way. He would make reference to being a member of Omega Psi Phi, but he didn't go deep into it. But when he got tighter with Steve Coakley, he was silent. Okay? So their silence contributed to a lot of this madness. And in the words of Dr. King, silence is betrayal. I fundamentally believe that had they spoken up back then, not to say it would have necessarily changed minds, because some of these folks are too stiff necked and stubborn for that. You can't tell them nothing, as Bunchy Carter would say. But here's the thing: these folks, if they had done that, it could have helped to put a dent in some of this craziness, this silliness. And another thing, you know, the author Alex Haley, who wrote Roots. Well, guess what? His father, Mr. Simon Haley, Alpha Man, Alpha. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Mr. Simon Haley, who was known as Professor Haley or Fessa Haley, because he taught at different HBCUs, including UAPB, which is University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, um, UAPB in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Um, he, I said, he was an alpha man, a proud alpha man. So I'm going to say this: for those of you who like to talk about being Pan Africanists and like to uh, raise the names of Kwame Nkrumah, Nnamdi Ezekwe, and others of that ilk, and love to talk about Huey Newton this and Huey Newton that, and many other people who you admire, um, you need to keep their names out of your mouth or your mouths, plural, because more than one person talking is madness. Keep their names out your mouths because these folks have left indelible marks um, in the community, and we have benefited from the work that they've put in. We have benefited, and let's be clear: the Candace Owens of the world, the Brandon Tatums of the world, the Larry Elders of the world, and a host of other clowns out here who talk out the side of their neck. None of them, if you check it, none of them are members of the Boule, Prince Hall Masons, Eastern Stars, or any of the Black Greek letter organizations. None of them. And I say that to say this. Those individuals, just to name a few I just mentioned, all of them are traitors to the race. They are. So you can never say, well, they're members of the Boule. What'd you expect? No, 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 they are not. They are not. So you need to check yourself on that. So um, I'm going to end it. And I'm saying to Mr. Phil Scott and others, back off and leave the Divine Nine alone. Leave folk alone. You are now engaging harassment, and that what you're doing is uh, uh, reheating what we were exposed to and dealt with. Those things that cause harm 30 and 35 years, between 30 and 35 years ago. We don't need that. And we're saying that day is done. No more days like those. No more. So I'm going to end this and say thank you for checking me out here. I look forward to please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Please comment in the comment section. I need to hear from y'all. I love to hear from y'all, whether you like, dislike, agree, disagree, etc. And I want to get to the point where I'm able to go on live. We have a, and at some point we'll do this. We'll have a Q&A with this. I welcome that. I don't run from this stuff. I don't run. I believe in meeting things head on. So you got something to say to Dr. Soul Brother? Come with it. Come with it. Okay? I'm right here. I ain't going nowhere. So please share this with other people. Share this with other people who may be Divine Nine members. And until the next time, God bless.